Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Hanifin, the managing editor of The Wise Marketer, and I'm here with Whitnee Hawthorne, who's with Snowflake. It's really neat to talk to you, and Snowflake is one of those intriguing companies that sometimes I think in the loyalty business we can become a little bit self-centered or navel-gazing, let's say. So we tend to focus on all the loyalty providers, those companies that provide loyalty technology, management systems, and things. But you know, data is the core of our business, and Snowflake now is prominent. I'm hearing Snowflake come up in so many different conversations. But before we get into all of that, just tell me a little bit about yourself, like your history in loyalty, and just what your current responsibilities are at Snowflake.
Sure. So hi, I'm Whitnee Hawthorne. I am the Global Head of Travel and Hospitality at Snowflake. And my role is really to help translate how data and AI can help travel and hospitality companies deliver on their business goals, whether that's improving the customer experience, driving a more efficient operation, or increasing revenue and profitability.
Okay, so those are big, broad brushes. And when I think about, isn't that what we're trying to do in our loyalty management system? So what does Snowflake bring to the equation that's different than, say, an LMS, or maybe it's a CDP or whatever kind of data lake that somebody's operating?
Yeah, that's great. So what Snowflake really helps to do is to enable all of those things: CDPs, hyper-personalized marketing, loyalty, collaboration, partnership. We really help to enable that and allow you to get more insights out of your data, have more action with your data, and ultimately deliver on all of those really cool AI and generative AI functionalities or products that folks are looking to leverage. So if I take that just kind of like a step deeper, one of the things that I get really excited about is not just the data warehouse that Snowflake is, but the actual ecosystem that we're a part of. Last year in September, we launched the Travel and Hospitality AI Data Cloud, which sounds like kind of woo-woo, esoteric, like what in the world are we even talking about? Right. And so what that is, it's really, for me, there's three parts to it. On one side, you have customers, primary and let's call it secondary customers, right? And those primary customers are travel and hospitality company customers. And at Snowflake, travel and hospitality is broad, which is not unlike most software companies. Like an Amazon's going to operate the same way, but or AWS is going to operate the same way. But travel and hospitality for us, it's airlines, hotels, rental cars, cruise companies, quick service restaurants, travel tech, OTAs, TMCs, spas, casinos, gyms. It kind of goes on and on, right?
Big category.
But very, very broad category. But you can think about all of those as travel and hospitality companies. And so you have those types of customers on one side. And then on the other side, you have the first, second, and third party data that sits on the Snowflake platform. And in the middle, and this is the most interesting part for me, is everything that makes that data useful. The language models, the applications, the partners, the AI functionality, right, that is inherent to the platform. Right. All the things that make that data useful. When you put those together, that really is what the AI Data Cloud represents. Okay, so this will be a newbie question maybe for you, but is a CDP part of the Snowflake ecosystem? Is that one element of it? Yeah, so that would sit in the middle when we start thinking about making the data useful.
Yes.
So Snowflake itself doesn't offer a CDP. Okay. But we have a lot of partners that do sit within that space, that in the middle, right, in that middle layer, that take the data on Snowflake and then turn that into, or allow that, right, maybe you guys edit that part, okay. We do have a lot of partners who sit in the middle who develop CDPs leveraging the Snowflake platform. And leveraging that platform, you can ensure that your data is secure, that it's governed, that it's unified, and also that you can enrich it with third-party data where it makes sense.
Okay, so hygiene included in that as well?
Yes.
Okay, so, and I have just a curiosity question, because I've worked with so many clients that when we talk about, well, let's do a data download, let's look at the customer base, try to get some insights, they always, as a rule, tell us that their data is high quality and in pretty good shape. I mean, once in a while we have somebody say, oh, it's a mess, good luck, you need to do some work with it. But what's the state of data these days when you get these, you engage with a large, let's go into the large retail, large category of those that you're working with. Is it pretty buttoned up these days, or is there still a lot of gaps to close?
I'd say there's still a lot of opportunity in closing the gaps. When I start thinking about our customers and the data maturity curve, right, you kind of start with migration,
Okay.
right? And for migration to happen, you first do need to understand where your data is, what it is. You need to clean it up,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
you provide that hygiene, categorize it, make sure the nomenclature is appropriate. But you have to do that cleanup, and then you migrate, right? And so if we think
Right.
about the maturity curve, the first place is migrating. After migrating, you can move into the space of predictive analytics,
Okay.
right? So that's then being able to drive better insights than you were before. From predictive analytics, we see companies start to move into AI and ML applications as well as monetization, right? So starting to monetize that data.
Right.
And from there, we start to think about the idea of true generative AI capability, moving finally into what I would call a complete ecosystem where everything is operating together.
Right, right.
And it's a long curve. We've got customers in different places along that data curve. As you move into that predictive, and when you think about, because it's layered, so when you think about moving through that maturity curve, you don't do it with all your data all at once. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So usually you're identifying a use case and saying, here's the use case that I want to work on. Here are the data sets aligned, and you
Yeah.
start there. And so what does that mean? It means for a lot of companies, portions of their data today are in a really healthy state, and other portions are still waiting to go through those early migration steps.
Okay, interesting. So I don't know if you were in the session earlier today, but there was a comment made. I think Phil Rubin, who's the conference chair, asked the group, he said, how many of you are using 50% or more of your data, available data? And I don't think one hand went up. Did that surprise you?
Not at all. Not at all. This is, the fact of the matter is, like, data everywhere and no insights to be found.
Okay.
Like, not for the amount of data that exists. And it's
Yeah.
because the data's not always usable. Right?
Right.
Can you trust it? Right? You need a single source of truth oftentimes to trust the data. It can be hard to access the data. There can be a lot of latency along with the mistrust. So not only do you're not sure really if the data I'm getting is the
Right.
right data, it's also old,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so it makes it hard to actually truly leverage it. And that is not even including the idea of the data silos, where within an organization you have your data sitting in multiple places. Like if I think about airlines, for example, I'm one person,
Right.
but I'm in at least 3 platforms, right? I'm in a passenger platform that really has to do with the day of operations and me flying. I'm in a loyalty platform, right, with my loyalty number and membership, and I'm
Right.
separately in a marketing platform as a customer, let's call it, instead of just
Okay.
a loyalty member.
Right.
And trying to even pull together all of those pieces to make an informed decision, it's not happening in enough places yet.
Interesting. So you mentioned data silos. That's your topic for tomorrow, isn't it? You're on a panel talking about data silos. What are you going to dig into there?
I think we'll dig into whatever really the audience wants to hear, since it's a panel.
Okay.
I think one of the things that's really important to me is the idea of starting, like I mentioned, or you mentioned that I mentioned,
Yeah.
starting to solve previously unsolvable problems.
Oh, yeah, that's a great term.
Yeah, and taking this step back and saying, well, why do we do the things that we do? Why do we do them the way that we do? And a lot of times that comes back to what data was accessible at the time. And sometimes there's no data accessible at the time, right? And so it was
Right.
someone's gut decision. Oftentimes the data was limited. My favorite example to just take a step back and think about this, because I think it resonates with most people who have ever traveled, is the idea that airlines close the plane door 15 or 20 minutes before departure. So I don't know if you've ever been in that experience where you have a connecting flight and you misconnect, right? So your flight gets in late.
Yes.
And you hustle to the next gate.
Yeah.
You get there and they say, oh, I'm so sorry, we closed the door, let's look at reaccommodating you, getting you on the next flight.
Right.
And you're sitting there and the plane is out there.
It's happened.
And you're saying, hey, but I see the plane there. Said, no, we can't open that door once we close it. But come on over here and let me reaccommodate you at the stand, right? The ticket agent maybe helps you do it.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there, and this process takes 10 minutes to get you reaccommodated on the next flight 2 hours later, and the plane is still there.
Yeah.
And you're going, well, what the heck? Why did they
Maddening.
close the door? It's
Yeah,
the most
sure.
frustrating experience.
Sure.
At the same time, that seemingly arduous, not arduous isn't the right word, that seemingly, what is the right word? This decision that you make just because, right? It's like a decision
Sort
that
of arbitrary?
Arbitrary.
Yeah.
That's not arduous. Arbitrary.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
So that arbitrary decision to close the door 20 or 50 minutes before has a lot to do with the fact that airlines can't process all the data required to know whether or not to keep the door open.
Oh, interesting.
And that
Okay.
is because oftentimes of data silos, right? Data that sits in different places,
Okay,
as
yeah.
well as latency and being able to bring all that data together, right? Now, in today's world, what we're starting to see and what we know can happen is that data can come together, and I'll talk about some of that data in a second, but that data can come together, and then you can apply generative AI to do the analysis quickly that a mind just can't do very quickly, to say, keep that door open for this person who's connecting.
You know what, as consumers, we're also critical of brands, right? And especially in air travel, everybody just, you have that experience, you say, I'll never fly that airline again, and, of course you're back.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, it's much more complex than you would think. So here's a scenario for you, in that if the airline had access to the data, they knew that you were actually deplaning, and they knew what gate you were at, and they know how long the walk or maybe like half running time is, they could factor all these things together and say, you know what, we're actually going to hold and not close the door for that person right? Because it's very reasonable that they're going to be there. But if they can't do all those machinations, they're not going to do it. They're just going to go by the operating manual and say it's 15 minutes before, boom.
Yep. Which is a data limitation, right? Exactly,
That's
that's what
right.
they're going to do. But the limitations get removed, and we can start thinking about not just those things that you mentioned, but even more, right? So imagine that I can understand who is on this passenger manifest, who's going to travel, and I know that Bill is coming in on a late plane.
Yeah.
And coming in on this late plane, I also know the time from, the average time, walking time from this gate to that gate. So let's just say gate A to gate B. I know whether or not Bill is traveling alone or with small children, which might slow down that walking time.
That's right.
I know whether or not Bill has mobility issues and may need a wheelchair, which would also slow
of
down
factors,
that
lot of
walking
factors.
time, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I know whether or not Bill has checked a bag. I need to consider that, or if he has not checked a bag, right? I know all of these things. And those are all different data sets that kind of need to come together. In addition, I can also want to bring in to understand Bill as a loyalty member.
Oh, that's another factor.
Right. So how valuable do I see you to the company?
Right.
And what is your loyalty status? And I
Right.
can start to bring that in to the
Right.
into the equation.
Right.
I can then also start to feed in the data around the plane itself. Right. So is there backup on the tarmac? Right. Is this plane a plane that's likely going to go out and sit for 20 minutes
So many
anyway?
factors.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
the luggage loaded? Is this a plane that might need to be de-iced?
Right.
Is the crew actually showing up on time or not, right? I can start to take all these different data pieces, bring them together,
Right.
and then make the right decision to say, you know what? I don't need to close the plane until Bill gets on.
Right.
Or I don't need to close the plane until 3 minutes past departure time
Mm-hmm.
because I know I'm not going to be able to take off anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can even get to the point of being able to process this. Is where generative AI really starts to come in,
Mm-hmm.
to process it and say, what is the ultimate revenue impact of me holding the plane to 3 minutes past?
Yeah.
And then make that
Yeah.
decision based on like actual dollars and
You
not
can
just
actually
customer
calculate
experience.
ROI on all of that, right? It's customer sat might be one, but there's an actual
ROI is
ROI.
another thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those were previously unsolvable problems that now we are seeing the capability to
That's
solve.
incredible. So somebody was just talking, the whole conference, the theme here is about getting loyalty unstuck and transcending the points programs and sort of the promotional aspect of things. Somebody just told me, they said people are loyal to brands, not programs. And then somebody said, actually, they might be, at least in sort of where the brands are on par, you have choice as a consumer, they're probably loyal to the experience as a deciding factor. It's almost a race, like whoever could assemble the data this way and be able to triage it and make those good decisions. That goes beyond just reporting to the FAA, my on-time departure rates or
Yes.
something like that. This is being able to manage in such an optimized way that the traveler is delighted. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Or at least
And
not inconvenienced any more than they have to be.
exactly, not inconvenienced any more than they have to be, and directly weighing it against profitability, which ultimately, right, is the goal for businesses to be profitable.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting that we are in a space where the question isn't if this will happen, it's when and who will be first.
Yeah.
And
okay.
whoever's first is really going to drive the path for others to follow, which means others may not be leaders in the space, and some will become obsolete, right? Because they're not able to actually deliver at that standard.
Well, not to distract from the main part of the conversation, but it's another scenario that I found interesting yesterday. I flew out from Fort Lauderdale to LA yesterday before the conference, was on an airline that that you have on your resume, and I love it because they messaged me in flight, and I was getting messages. But do you know, I was not early, and as I'm walking down the concourse, I saw that people were queued up and boarding the flight, but it was also 20 minutes before flight time. I looked at my app, and in big red letters it said, "Doors closed." And I thought, that's interesting. So I wonder if they built a buffer into the app to get me to hustle and hurry, but it also could have sent me into a panic. And then actually what happened is I didn't get to get my bottle of water or little snack that I wanted. And once I got in line, I realized, oh, I had time. But maybe that's just too much of a personal story, but it's another way that maybe data could be optimized. I mean,
I think that's where it starts to say, that doors closed may or may not have been a buffer to try and get you to the airline, but it could also be a thing where you can start to think about sending that message, right? Because that's a little bit of manipulation, right? We're manipulating to get you, which
Sure.
is, if it's in your best interest or whatever, like there's different reasons to do it. The company can make the decision whether we want to manipulate or not.
Yeah.
But it'd be really cool to be able to do it based on who you are as a traveler, right? So maybe you send that doors closed to someone who doesn't travel often, who's an infrequent traveler, because they need to hurry, versus sending it to someone who's traveling, who's a business traveler traveling every week and gets the system and knows what time to show up. And you could send them a note saying, doors literally closing, like closing in 30 seconds. And there's going to be a different response.
I am stunned and immensely curious about what the future might hold. And just, you've touched on it now, just talking about some of these scenarios, but what else would you say, what's the future hold actually in the way that we can manage data to create better customer experiences?
So I think a lot of things are coming that are going to make not only a better customer experience, but also provide a direct bottom line impact to companies and improve employee experience. And I think when you have that situation that the customer experience gets better, the employee experience gets better, and it's directly designed to drive profit, right? This is really exciting. And so some of the things I think we're going to see coming are an actual true seamless journey, right? Through data collaboration, which is something that Snowflake enables, the ability to share and collaborate data with your partners, right? That third party kind of exchange. And what that looks like to me as a traveler, no longer having to be the middleman. So for example, my flight got in super late last night, and by the time I got into I called an Uber ride service, right? By the time I got into my ride share, I realized that I wasn't going to get to the hotel until after 1 o'clock.
Oh boy.
And so I was a little bit nervous of like, are they holding my reservation? Are they not holding my reservation? Let me go ahead and call and make sure. Right? In that instance, I'm the middleman. My flight gets in a little late. Because of that, I have to call the hotel to make sure that I am that they know that I'm arriving, because my hotel and my airline aren't talking to each other, even if maybe there is some type of points exchange going there, right? They're a points partner of the airline.
True.
So I think in the future, and really heading into this year, we're going to see a lot more data collaboration that's going to enable things like, I land, my flight is late, I get a message from the hotel saying, hey, we see that your flight was late. We're holding your room. Don't worry. See you when you get here, right? That exchange. That'll happen also for ground transport. So if I had a car pre-reserved, right, having the company understand that my flight is late, letting me know, hey, your car is still here. We've adjusted your car based on the time of your flight coming in.
Right.
That type of true seamless journey, I think, it's coming this year.
You know what, I think it's really important in this category too, because I've honestly thought at times that if you're a retailer, we had somebody talking about Williams Sonoma and some other big retailers, but I thought, oh, there was a lady from Target who talked today, and I thought, what a great playground that is. If you're going to reshape the customer experience to the benefit of customer loyalty, you have so many options, right? But air travel experience is a little bit different. It's a tough environment these days. There's only so much you can do. It's almost like you have to serve at sort of the lowest common denominator, just in safeties in mind. But you're kind of expanding my mind here, thinking that if I simplified it, I'd said, who would have thought that data optimization and management would be maybe the door opener for improving the travel experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even gets to, if we're staying in the airline space with crew scheduling, have you ever been on a flight and they're like, oh, the last crew timed out, we're trying to find you a new crew, hold on, right? By leveraging data and generative AI, you can start to enhance your crew scheduling, taking into consideration everything, right? That schedule that day, what is happening, across your network, what is happening across the airport, and data exchange with the airport and the ATC. You can also then start to pull in the contracts, right? Because contracts matter when you're trying to do your staffing.
Right,
You pull all of that in and can start to actually get more efficient and effective with how you're handling staffing and have that happen a lot less often.
Okay.
At the same time, airlines don't have to then have crew waiting, right? Just sitting around waiting, which is very expensive for kind of like that type of problem to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, and it expands out into, we just talked a lot about airlines, but it expands out into hotels, it expands out into cruise lines. One of the things that came up earlier that I think is really interesting is this idea of, we want to use the data to know you and do things with you, but we don't want it to be creepy.
Yeah, of course.
And I've been thinking about that for a long time back when I was in loyalty, right? Because loyalty can get creepy if you're too personalized.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to start moving from this space of being creepy to being comfortable, right? And so this has a lot to do with brand trust, right? And trusting the brand.
Yeah.
But it also has to do with that zero-party data with a customer saying, I want you to know these things about me.
There you
So
go.
for example, imagine that I want the hotel to know that I like to sleep cold. I want my room set at 60 when I show up in the middle of the night so I can kind of just go straight to bed,
Yep.
right? Being able to walk into the room and the room is cold, right? By bringing your data systems together, you can even, right, to the point of controlling the AC in the room soon,
Right.
Allow that to happen seamlessly.
That's fantastic. That's something. So before we wrap this up, you're in a room full of loyalty marketers. This is, I guess, your area of emphasis. You've got a history working for a number of brands on loyalty programs, but if they needed to know one or two things about Snowflake that would change the way they look at this business, what would that be?
I would say if you are wondering, what is the next, right? What is the next thing in loyalty? How do we move past just thinking about making our points efficient and providing real experiences for our customers?
Yeah.
That all starts with data and understanding your customer, and not just understanding how your customer interacts with you, but being able to leverage that third-party data to understand how they interact with the world, right? And that's something that Snowflake can help to enable
Okay.
in a
Awesome.
safe and secure way.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Whitnee Hawthorne with Snowflake. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
You bet. All right, bye, everyone.